Hello, in this short lecture I will give you a couple of reasons for the non-existence of God. The first reason for why God doesn't exist is that because of the fact that God is perfect, so He would have never created such an imperfect world. The second reason for the non-existence of God is that God would have never created the human beings that are capable to do evil, sins, and crimes. And we can ask the simple question why God created the human beings from the beginning. If the answer to that question is that he wanted to put them to the test, then it makes no sense because he could have created perfect creatures that will never do any wrong, any sins or crimes, and then he didn't have to put anyone to the test. And we should also remember that God knows what will happen in the future. So God knew that the human beings will do evil, sins, and crimes. So if you knew it, so why He created them from the beginning? As I already said, He could have created perfect creatures that will never do any wrong or any evil at all. And therefore we can deduce that the human creatures were not, the humans beings were not created by God. That is to say, God doesn't exist. The third reason for the non-existence of God is that God would have never created such a world in which there is so much humans sufferings, so much violence, so much cruelty, so much diseases, and so much wars, and also so much poverty and hunger, and so much natural disasters such as earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes. So such a bad world would have never been created by God. And therefore God didn't create the world. That is to say, God doesn't exist. And the fourth reason for the non-existence of God is that God would have never created such a reality where the very existence of the predator is dependent in his ability to kill the prey. The very existence of the lion is dependent in his ability to kill the lamb or the deer or any other animal in order to survive. So such a cruel reality where there is so much injustice would have never been created by God. For that reason God didn't create the world. That is to say, God doesn't exist. And the fifth reason for the non-existence of God is that there are actually three monotheistic religions, and monotheistic is defined as a belief in one God or the oneness of God. And those religions are actually the Christianity, the Judaism, and the Islam, and they contradict each other in their explanation of how God created the world. and they also don't have the same God. The God of the Christianity is not the same God as the God of the Judaism or the God of the Islam. So because of all those contradictions and differences in gods, we can deduce that none of them are true. They are all false. They are all the invention of the human beings. And God also was created by the human beings. That is to say, God doesn't exist. And the last reason for the non-existence of God is actually a logic reason. We can say that logically it is impossible that such an entity that is omnipotent is exist, or logically it is impossible that such a being that is all power exists. And I will explain why. Because we can ask the simple question, if God is able to create such a big stone that he himself cannot lift. If the answer to that question is positive, then we can deduce that God cannot lift the stone that he himself created. Therefore, God is not omnipotent. God is not all power. And if the answer to that question is negative, then we can simply say that God cannot create such a big stone that he himself cannot lift. Therefore, God is not omnipotent. God is not all power. Anyway, from that example, we can deduce that such a being that is omnipotent logically cannot exist. Or such an entity that is all power cannot exist logically. And therefore, God that is defined as all power cannot exist logically. That is to say, God doesn't exist. So those were all the reasons for the non-existence of God. Okay, thank you very much.